Medieval England, the 12th century. It's summer, and the harvest is in full swing. The villagers have been working the fields since dawn, an ordinary day, like thousands before it. And then, near the edge of the field, by some old pits, the workers stop. Something is standing there, at the tree line. Something that shouldn't be there at all. Two children, a boy and a girl, frightened and crying, speaking words no one can understand. But that isn't the strange part. The skin of both children is green, not pale, not sickly, green. Who they were, where they came from, and what happened to them, no one has ever explained, even 900 years later. This is the story of the Green Children of Woolpit. To understand what happened, we have to start with the place. This was southern England, around the middle of the 12th century. A small village, surrounded by fields and thick forest. The village was called Woolpit. The name means wolf pits. Nearby were old pits once used to trap wolves. A quiet, ordinary place. It was summer, and the harvest was on. The villagers had been working the fields since dawn. An ordinary day, like thousands before it. And then someone noticed movement near the edge of the old pits. Someone was there. The workers came closer, and stopped. Standing by the pit were two children, a boy and a girl. They were frightened, confused, and clearly had no idea where they were. But the first thing anyone noticed was their skin. It was green. Not pale, not grey, green, all over their bodies. The children wore strange clothing, made of unfamiliar cloth, cut in an unfamiliar way. No one in the village had ever seen anything like it. The children were saying something, but no one could understand a word. It wasn't the local language. It wasn't like any speech they knew. The adults didn't know what to make of it. In front of them were just two frightened children. But the green skin and the strange speech unsettled even them. In the end, they decided not to leave the children there. They took them back to the village, to feed them, calm them, and work out what to do. Word spread instantly. People came from all around just to look at the green children. No one could say who they were or where they had come from. And then things got even stranger, because it turned out the children would refuse to eat almost anything at all. They were offered bread, meat, everything the village had. The children wouldn't touch any of it. They were hungry and weak, but they refused to eat. There was only one thing they would eat: fresh beans, green bean pods. Everything else, they turned down completely. For weeks, the children lived on almost nothing but beans. It was the only thing they would accept. Where the habit came from, no one understood. The children were taken in by a local nobleman, a knight with a large household. There, they could be looked after better than in a simple peasant home. Under his roof, the children slowly began to adjust. People tried to feed them normal food and get them used to local life. But the boy was weaker than his sister from the very start. He was withdrawn, ate poorly, and clearly struggled with everything that had happened to them. Over time, the boy only got worse. He grew weaker and weaker and faded. No one could help him. Before long, the boy died. Of the two children who had appeared from nowhere, only the girl was left. The girl, though, turned out to be stronger. She survived. And slowly, something began to change in her. In time, she started eating ordinary food, not just beans, but whatever the others ate. Her body was getting used to the local diet, and as it did, her skin began to change too. The green slowly faded until it was gone completely. After a while, she looked like an ordinary child. She grew up among the locals and slowly learned their language. And once she could finally speak, they asked her the one question that mattered. Where had she come from? What she said is the most mysterious part of the whole story. Because her explanation is unlike anything ordinary, the girl said that she and her brother had come from a faraway land, and in that land everything was different from here. According to her, everyone there was just like them, with green skin. To her, green was normal. It was the local people who seemed strange. But the strangest thing was something else. She said that in their land, the sun never shines. It is always twilight there, a constant dim half-light. In her account, far off in the distance there was another brighter land, as if across a wide river. But they themselves lived in permanent gloom. And then, how they ended up here. The girl said she and her brother had been herding their father's cattle, and the animals wandered toward the mouth of a large cave. The children followed the animals inside, into the dark, and deep within they heard a strange sound, as if bells were ringing somewhere far away. They followed that sound through a long, dark passage, and at the end they saw light, and stepped out into the open. And then bright sunlight hit them. After their endless twilight, it blinded them. They found themselves in a strange world, flooded with sun. This was that very field by the village. Blinded and terrified, the children couldn't find their way back to the cave. And that is how the villagers found them. There was no way back. Where exactly the cave was, the girl couldn't really explain. Their old world was somewhere behind them, out of reach. And that was her whole story. A land of endless twilight, green people, cattle, a cave, bells, and blinding sun at the way out. She had nothing more to add. No one knew what to do with it. The story sounded like a fairy tale. But standing right in front of everyone was a living person, a girl who had once been green. Which raises a fair question. How do we even know about this story? Maybe it's just a village tale that grew taller over the centuries. But this story was written down by two medieval chroniclers, independently of each other. Both lived around the same time and were considered serious men for their era. They described almost the same thing: two green children, a strange language, the beans, the boy's death, and the girl's story of a sunless land. It is those matching details that make the story so hard to dismiss. On a few points, their accounts differ slightly, but the core is the same in both, and when two different people describe the same thing, it starts to look like more than a simple invention. For context, England in those years was going through hard times, a long struggle for the throne with wars and unrest rolling across the country. Life was harsh and dangerous. People of that era were deeply superstitious. They believed in miracles, in evil spirits, in other worlds. Green children fit easily into that view of things. So many at the time simply decided the children had come from some other world. For a medieval mind, that was almost a natural explanation. But if you strip away the superstition and look at the facts soberly, several explanations appear, and they are very different. Let's take them one at a time. The first explanation is the medieval one. The children came from another world. Old British legends are full of stories about a magical land beneath the earth, or beyond the ordinary world. These legends feature underground passages, a land of endless twilight, and beings unlike ordinary people. The girl's story is strikingly similar to those tales. And in British folklore, the colour green is often tied to the magical and the otherworldly, so the story of the green children could simply have become a beautiful legend. As a fairy tale, this explanation works perfectly. But as a real answer, it gives us nothing. Magical lands can't be tested. So many looked for a simpler answer, in ordinary life. And here is the most convincing explanation we have today. It needs no magic and no aliens. and it starts with who actually lived in England in those years. At that time, many settlers had moved to England from Flanders, a region in what is now Belgium and the Netherlands. They spoke their own language, Flemish, and life was hard for these settlers. Locals disliked them, and in those unstable, war-torn years they were often attacked. Many families were killed or lost everything. Among them, there could easily have been orphaned children, kids who had lost their parents and their home, frightened, hungry, and speaking Flemish, a language no English villager would know. And there is the explanation for the strange language. To peasants in a remote village, Flemish would have sounded like meaningless noise, and the children, in turn, couldn't understand the English. Now, the green skin. People who are badly malnourished can develop a particular blood condition caused by a lack of food and iron. It can turn the skin pale with a greenish tint. In earlier centuries, this condition was even associated with green-tinted skin. Starving, orphaned children could very plausibly have suffered from that kind of severe malnutrition. And this neatly explains why the girl's green color disappeared. Once she started eating properly, the condition lifted, and her skin became normal. The weaker boy simply didn't make it. It even explains the strange love of beans. Beans were one of the most common and available foods for the poor of that time. The starving children simply ate what they recognized and trusted. That leaves the cave, the bells, and the land without sun. And there is a reasonable explanation for those, too. Nearby were places with underground passages and old workings. Frightened children, fleeing danger, could easily have gotten lost in passages like those. A long time in the dark, and in a child's account, that turns easily into a land without sun and endless twilight. And the bells they heard in the cave? Somewhere nearby stood a large monastery with its own bells. Lost children might have heard them ringing underground and followed the sound. And when the children finally emerged from the dark passages into daylight, after so long in the dark, the sun really would have blinded them. Exactly as the girl described. There is one more detail. The girl called her homeland St. Martin's Land, and nearby there really was a place with a similar name, named after St. Martin. She may simply have been naming her real home. And so, piece by piece, a whole picture comes together. Orphaned settler children, a foreign language, a condition caused by hunger, beans, underground passages, and a real place nearby. In this version, almost everything fits, without a single miracle, which is why most people who have seriously studied the story lean toward it. But almost everything is not everything. There is no hard proof. No one knows for certain who these children were, and so the story still isn't closed. There is a third explanation too, a far bolder one. In modern times, some have suggested the children weren't from our world at all. In this version, the land of endless twilight is another planet, or some other world, and the cave was a kind of doorway between worlds. Supporters of this idea point to the green skin, the strange language, and the sunless land as signs of something completely alien. But this version hits the same wall as the fairy tale. There is no way to test it, and the simple explanation, hungry settler children, gets by just fine without other worlds. So in the end, there are 3 explanations. An other world, real orphaned children, and another world entirely. None of them can be fully proven. So what became of the girl herself? She survived, grew up among the locals, and stayed here. In time, she was barely different from any other villager. By some accounts, she was given a name, lived a long life, married, and worked as a servant in a wealthy household. The green child from nowhere became an ordinary grown woman. And that, perhaps, is the strangest part. The mystery didn't vanish off somewhere far away. It simply grew up, grew old, and quietly lived out its life among ordinary people. Her story stayed in the chronicles and was passed down, century after century. Almost 900 years later, people are still retelling it and trying to solve it. The village of Woolpit still exists today. And the locals haven't forgotten their most famous legend. It has long been part of the place itself. The Green Children even made it onto the village sign. A story almost 1,000 years old has remained its defining mark. So what really happened that summer day in the field? A beautiful legend that grew out of village retellings, or real, forgotten children behind it all? The most likely answer is quiet and sad. 2 orphaned children, a foreign tongue, a condition born of hunger, and a long walk through the dark. With no magic at all. But there is no certain answer. And as long as there isn't, another story will always live alongside the rational one, about a land of endless twilight where all the people are green. Somewhere there was a cave they came out of. Or there wasn't. 900 years later, there is no longer any way to check. 2 children with green skin once stepped out of the dark into the sunlight, and never managed to find their way home. And who they really were, we may never know.